Hi there. We're doing A Course in Miracles, Chapter 9. We're starting Chapter 9, which is called The Acceptance of the Atonement. And this is Section 1, The Acceptance of Reality. Fear of the will of God is one of the strangest beliefs the human mind has ever made. It could not possibly have occurred unless the mind were already profoundly split, making it possible for it to be afraid of what it really is. Reality cannot, quote, threaten, unquote, anything except illusions, since reality can only uphold truth. The very fact that the will of God, which is what you are, is perceived as fearful, demonstrates that you are afraid of what you are. It is not then the will of God of which you are afraid, but yours. Your will is not the ego's, and that is why the ego is against you. What seems to be the fear of God is really the fear of your own reality. It is impossible to learn anything consistently in a state of panic. If the purpose of this course is to help you remember what you are, and if you believe that what you are is fearful, then it must follow that you will not learn this course. Yet the reason for the course is that you do not know what you are. If you do not know what your reality is, why would you be so sure that it is fearful? The association of truth and fear, which would be highly artificial at most, is particularly inappropriate in the minds of those who do not know what truth is. All this could mean is that you are arbitrarily associating something beyond your awareness with something you do not want. It is evident then that you are judging something of which you are totally unaware. You have set up this strange situation so that it is impossible to escape from it without a guide who does know what your reality is. The purpose of this guide is merely to remind you of what you want. He is not attempting to force an alien will upon you. He is merely making every possible effort within the limits you oppose on him to reestablish your own will in your awareness. You have imprisoned your will beyond your own awareness, where it remains but cannot help you. When I said that the Holy Spirit's function is to sort out the true from the false in your mind, I meant that he has the power to look into what you have hidden and recognize the will of God there. His recognition of this will can make it real to you because he is in your mind, and therefore he is your reality. If then his perception of your mind brings its reality to you, he is helping you to remember what you are. The only source of fear in this process is what you think you will lose, yet it is only what the Holy Spirit sees that you can possibly have. I have emphasized many times that the Holy Spirit will never call upon you to sacrifice anything. But if you ask the sacrifice of reality of yourself, the Holy Spirit must remind you that this is not God's will because it is not yours. There is no difference between your will and God's. If you did not have a split mind, you would recognize that willing is salvation because it is communication. It is impossible to communicate in alien tongues. You and your Creator can communicate through creation because that and only that is your joint will. A divided mind cannot communicate because it speaks for different things to the same mind. This loses the ability to communicate simply because confused communication does not mean anything. A message cannot be communicated unless it makes sense. How sensible can your messages be when you ask for what you do not want? Yet as long as you are afraid of your will, this is precisely what you are asking for. You may insist that the Holy Spirit does not answer you, but it might be wiser to consider the kind of questioner you are. You do not ask only for what you want. This is because you are afraid you might receive it, and you would. That is why you persist in asking the teacher who would not possibly give you what you want. Of him, you can never learn what it is, and this gives you the illusion of safety. Yet you cannot be safe from truth, but only in truth. Reality is the only safety. Your will is your salvation because it is the same as God's. The separation is nothing more than the belief that it is different. No right mind can believe that its will is stronger than God's. If then a mind believes that its will is different from his, it can only decide either that there is no God or that God's will is fearful. The former accounts for the atheist and the latter for the martyr who believes that God demands sacrifices. Either of these insane decisions will induce panic because the atheist believes he is alone and the martyr believes that God is crucifying him. Yet no one really wants either abandonment or retaliation, even though many may seek both. Can you ask the Holy Spirit for, quote, gifts, unquote, such as these, and actually expect to receive them? He cannot give you something you do not want. When you ask the universal giver for what you do not want, you are asking for what cannot be given because it was never created. It was never created because it was never your will for you. Ultimately, everyone must remember the will of God because ultimately everyone must recognize himself. This recognition is the recognition that his will and God's are one. In the presence of truth, there are no unbelievers and no sacrifices. In the security of reality, fear is totally meaningless. To deny what is can only seem to be fearful. Fear cannot be real without a cause, and God is the only cause. God is love, and you do want him. This is your will. This is your will. Ask for this, and you will be answered because you will be asking only for what belongs to you. When you ask the Holy Spirit for what would hurt you, he cannot answer because nothing can hurt you, and so you are asking for nothing. Any wish that stems from the ego is a wish for nothing, and to ask for it is not a request. It is merely a denial in the form of a request. The Holy Spirit is not concerned with form, being aware only of meaning. The ego cannot ask the Holy Spirit for anything because there is complete communication failure between them. Yet you can ask for everything of the Holy Spirit because your requests to him are real, being of your right mind. Would the Holy Spirit deny the will of God? And could he fail to recognize it in his Son? You do not recognize the enormous waste of energy you expend in denying truth. What would you say of someone who persists in attempting the impossible, believing that to achieve it is to succeed? The belief that you must have the impossible in order to be happy is totally at variance with the principle of creation. God could not will that happiness depended on what you could never have. The fact that God is love does not require belief, but it does require acceptance. It is indeed possible for you to deny facts, although it is impossible for you to change them. If you hold your hands over your eyes, you will not see because you are interfering with the laws of seeing. If you deny love, you will not know it because your cooperation is the law of its being. You cannot change laws you did not make, and the laws of happiness were created for you, not by you. Any attempt to deny what is must be fearful, and if the attempt is strong, it will induce panic. Wheeling against reality, though impossible, can be made into a very persistent goal even though you do not want it. But consider the result of this strange decision. You are devoting your mind to what you do not want. How real can this devotion be? If you do not want it, it was never created. If it were never created, it is nothing. Can you really devote yourself to nothing? God in his devotion to you created you devoted to everything and gave you what you are devoted to. Otherwise, you would not have been created perfect. Reality is everything, and you have everything because you are real. You cannot make the unreal because the absence of reality is fearful, and fear cannot be created. As long as you believe that fear is possible, you will not create. Opposing orders of reality make reality meaningless, and reality is meaning. Remember then that God's will is already possible and nothing else will ever be. This is the simple acceptance of reality, because only that is real. You cannot distort reality and know what it is. And if you do distort reality, you will experience anxiety, depression, and ultimately panic because you're trying to make yourself unreal. When you feel these things, do not try to look beyond yourself for truth can only be within you. Say, therefore, Christ is in me, and where he is, God must be, for Christ is part of him. This section is called the acceptance of reality. What is it we are accepting? We are accepting the truth about ourselves. We are accepting God's will, which is really only our will. We are accepting that God is love, and God is not fearful. And Jesus starts this section by saying, let's read this again. Fear of the will of God is one of the strangest beliefs the human mind has ever made. So we made fear. Jesus has said this before. God only creates. What does God create? Love. God creates and extends love. That's all that God does. That is God's will. And Jesus also says we are not only do we share the will of God, but we are the will of God. So we are the love that God created and extends. And in reality, Jesus says at different places in the Course, we are one with God. There really is no separation at all. And we can only talk about it in these terms because we are still deluded by the ego to some extent. Now let's read well, let's just say a few things. First of all, Jesus talks a lot here about the will of God, and that God is love, and love only knows love. Nothing else really exists. Everything other than that is an illusion, is unreal. Only love is real. God is only love. We are only love. When we are afraid of God or afraid of the will of God, that is only due to our allegiance with the ego. And the ego does not want us to know what we really are. It is all about the illusion and the confusion. And it's important to remember, and it's important to say this again and again, that the ego is really nothing. God, the love of God is everything. The ego is nothing. In the cosmic game, the score is still the same. Love won, fear nothing. Love already won. It has already won, and it's always been won. W-O-N and O-N-E. And fear is nothing. Fear nothing. Fear nothing because love won. Jesus talks about two possibilities. There's the atheist and there's the martyr. The martyr believes in sacrifice, believes that God's will is that we suffer in order to know God, or in order for the truth to be brought to humanity, that we need to do that in order for love to blossom, or for God to be found. There needs to be some kind of sacrifice. And the atheist believes that God, we're alone, and there is no God. And when we die, when that's it. This life is all we have, and there's no one really running the show. There's no. I mean, in a sense, that's true. That's that's where a little bit further in the Course, where we could talk about who is running the show. Is God like pulling strings and so on? Is the Holy Spirit a real thing, or as Ken Wapnick, for example, has said that the Holy Spirit really is spoken of as all these different things in the Course, like a guide and God's voice, etc., etc. But the Holy Spirit really is just the memory of God, of the love of God. And it's still there within all of us, in all of our minds. It's still there. And that memory helps us to know, to weed out the truth from the false, truth from falsity. That's like the what do you call it? The lighthouse. We're sailing our ship to safety, and the lighthouse shows the way. And that would be like the Holy Spirit. And keep in mind that Jesus, who is giving this course, he is one with the Holy Spirit, so he is the Holy Spirit. So when he talks here about that we need a guide, and this idea goes back, if you read the Hindu scriptures like the Upanishads, it says again and again that you need a guide, you need a guru. Why? Because most of us are really in the dark about these things. We don't even, most of the time we're not even aware of the spiritual reality that we are. That we're not even maybe in touch with that. So Jesus says, "It is evident then that you are judging something of which you are totally unaware. You have set up this strange situation so that it's impossible to escape from it without a guide who does know what your reality is. The purpose of this guide is merely to remind you of what you want. He is not attempting to force an alien will upon you." So the Holy Spirit, Jesus, they cannot force anything on you. There's no pressure, there's no judgment, there's no command or demand to do anything. All they can do is be that lighthouse that reminds you. And by the way, they're only reminding you that you are that yourself, that we are all one in that love. You're not any different, we're not different than the Holy Spirit or Jesus. That is what we really are. That is just the memory of the truth of what we are. The ego does not want us to know what we are. Because if we know what we are, the ego is no more. But the ego is nothing anyway. So that's why this course is so fascinating. It's presenting something which on the surface is like bizarre, or like how can this be true? It's really beyond the mind, and it's paradoxical. It's getting at a paradoxical reality. Even just to say that we're afraid of nothing. The fear is, when you go back to what fear is, it truly is nothing. If you accept, and it's hard to accept this, and that's what this section is, the acceptance of reality. If you accept what Jesus is saying, that only love is real, only the love of God, that's the only reality. In that love, there is no fear. There is only the knowing of that oneness. Now, allied with the ego, what we say to that is, man, that's no fun. That's fucking boring. Who would want that? That is so lame. I need drama. I like being in my body and being alive and being. I mean, we all do. most people do, not everyone does, but this course is not taking that away from anyone, you know. It's what it wants to take away from you is what we all don't want. We don't want the anxiety, the depression, the stress, all the other stuff. It's not going to take away from you, you know, your individual life. I mean, everyone is going to die at some point, but you can still live a good, happy, fulfilled life, and maybe even more so with the help of A Course in Miracles. It's really just taking away the anxiety, the depression, the lack of meaning, the lack of purpose, and it's reminding you that you can live in love, and you can have your cake and eat it too, and you can be fulfilled, and you can be happy, and you deserve love, because that's what you are. And everyone is the same. Thank you for listening, and we'll keep going with this chapter next time. See ya.